So it just, did you want to chime in? Where do you live?
I live in Vienna.
Yeah, so it's probably Potomac River. So if you go up to Great Falls, south of Great Falls, or where the waterfalls are up there, is where the intakes are. Whole lot of stuff happens above those intakes. So that's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I live in Fairfax Station area near Lorton, and it's on the Occoquan
Oh,
watershed.
right, okay.
And you have 123 that goes right down the road. On one side, it's a 5-acre minimum. On the other side, it's all development. At least it used to be 5-acre minimum to protect the watershed. But
In
now,
theory.
something's happened and they're building more, more houses that aren't 5-acre minimums. So I don't know what's going on, but it's changed and nothing's been said.
Well, and you know, Fairfax got, well, see, I told you, nobody hears about anything
No.
until the public hearing comes around. Fairfax, years ago, actually when we were trying to pass this, they were in the news because that whole area was having E. coli breakouts because the septic fields were not functioning right. And that's all in the watershed of the drinking water source. Yeah, and that's what got our elected officials like, oh, we don't want to be like Fairfax and be in the news for, you know, bad water quality. So yeah, it's stuff that you have to deal with. See a whole lot more of these kind of things. I love it. Let's mark them. Let's, you know, people have no idea. Do you know how many people think that water that goes into a storm drain goes to the sewage treatment plant before it gets discharged? Ask somebody. Somebody not too smart, but you know, there's people who really think that. And when you start looking at, especially your project for assignment 2, if there's any water inlets, find out where that pipe goes. Even if it's way off-site. And you can kind of tell, oh, this is going downhill over here, it should probably goes this direction. Sometimes you can poke your head in and see which way the pipes are pointed to kind of get that idea, but there's discharge somewhere. And it goes right into the streams. And people just don't know.
Can you find a map of the pipes online somewhere so that you can actually see the whole underground?
They don't make that public knowledge. Why do you think that is?
Because it wouldn't make them look good.
Easily poison.
You can poison the water, terrorism, you know, somebody could release little robots into the system. She's laughing. We're gonna blow it up. We're gonna blow up this whole system. You can, you know. And water lines, they'll never show. Sewer lines, I doubt they would show. Because they're, you know, there's a sewer lid. I don't call them manholes. They're sewer lids. The sewer lid right there, take that off, boom. You can intercept the system. Okay, let's get back on track here. So the history of the evolution, I guess, of stormwater concepts. No controls, no quantity, no quality. So when we're talking about water quality, remember we're talking about both how much and how clean is it. Okay, it's quantity and quality. So back in the day, they didn't manage anything. There's a stream. There's a stream that runs under this driveway, under this road, right up through these backyards, up into here. Looks like it might even go in a channel right there. So there's no stream buffer. Nothing. This applicant right here comes in, that looks like a garden center or something, and says, you know, hey, we want to do some development. And we're going, well, you owe us, this is inside the beltway, so they would owe us a 60-foot buffer on that side. We're not going to make them take out half their business to put that buffer back in. We'll try to figure out, you know, a mutually agreeable solution that's negotiated, but, you know, there's just not a lot of hope for doing restoration right in that spot. But what we might ask them to do is to go up in this system and look for places that they could stabilize it. Because the water coming in through their property, if it was more stable, you know, cooler in temperature, and we talked about those things. So we'd ask them to look for a place up here that they could do some compensation because they can't do the buffer on their property.
You can only ask for that if they're doing renovations, right?
Right, if they're coming in for a permit. Right. Good point. Yeah, it's not self-implementing kind of
You
thing.
can't ask them after.
No, we can't go in there and go, you got no buffer, you got to shut down right now. No, if they come in and ask for something, we can say, you know, this is supposed to have a buffer, let's find a solution. Especially if it's something minor, we might even not say there's any mitigation at all. We might just say, oh, you're just coming in for a sign permit? You know, you're good to go. Yeah, so originally there was no quality or quantity. I would really like you to look at your watershed, your project, wherever you're gonna be. Is there stormwater management? Because in some places there won't be. So then we decided we had the solution. We said, well, let's do these regional ponds. There's a couple in Montgomery County. There was a whole plan to do like 100 of them across Prince George's to share the stormwater burden. Okay, you're thinking that's probably not such a bad idea. So what they used to do is, you can see there used to be a stream here, and now they built up the road, so that's a dam. So that's high. The dam, or the road, holds the water back. So that's like any other dam structure. And then here's the lake. It's very nice. There's a high-rise apartment building right there. There's all these townhouses and some single families. Very nice development, right? This was done in the probably early-ish 80s when they were first looking at regional ponds as a good solution. So this development's been here for a while. So I'm zooming out a little bit. So here's the dam, and here's the lake. And you can see this line here. Wow, it really doesn't show up. That's the watershed boundary. Just like you delineated the watersheds. That's the watershed boundary. Okay, so when they were designing this lake, they had to go, well, how much volume and where is it coming from, and is it impervious surface or whatever? So that's coming this way. So what's happening? Just draw in this. This is the dam, and this is going this way. Okay. So I think I have some helpful. Yeah. So there's the lake here. And that's how the water is flowing off the properties, right, into this lake. But what we found, now that we've had like 20 years to look at this development and see what's happening in Reston, Virginia. Anybody familiar with Reston, Virginia? Planned community, they're finding the same thing. Also, we're going to talk about them later, is that these streams that are feeding into this lake are becoming completely degraded. They're falling apart, their water quality is terrible, and that's because it's not a natural thing for these streams to they're getting all this runoff with no treatment, right? So these streams are receiving water just running off of parking lots, running off of backyards, picking up dog poop, the whole thing, running right into the stream that then runs into the lake. There's no treatment up here. That's how the regional pond system works. They're relying on the pond to let the pollutants settle out, and that's what happens. They kind of settle because they're heavier than the water, and they kind of settle out. And the wet ponds are better at cleaning up water than a dry pond situation is. So, yeah. So it slows it down. One bad thing is the temperature. Temperature definitely goes up because it's all exposed to the sun, and then when the water runs out, under the dam, it's a fairly high temperature. So it's really messing with the ecosystem of that stream. It's completely gone, obviously, where the lake is, right? So all of these streams now need to be stabilized. That's a huge amount of money. And Reston is doing it right now because they did the same thing. 70s and 80s, they came in and they built Lake Ann and all these little lakes around Reston. They're having all the same issues. And it's a huge multi-million-dollar issue to have to deal with. Nobody wants to do that. So, regional ponds, not the solution. Throw them off the books. We're learning. It takes us a really long time, but we're learning. So then we said, okay, the solution is to have every single site, or if they're cooperating a couple of sites together, do their own individual stormwater management. So there's this for this piece right here. There's this for this monstrosity with all this parking comes to here. Here's this one for these 4 buildings. So they're stormwater management ponds, which I always thought was a funny thing to call them because they're usually dry. So it's a dry pond. Military intelligence, cafeteria food, kind of not the same, right? So the idea was to capture it closer to the site, get it right when it's coming off of the surface, but pipe it all to one facility that grabs it for either just your property or a couple of properties and holds it for a time to let some of the bad stuff fall out, and then it discharges it to the stream, one hot mess. It's hot, it's still full of pollutants, it's a problem still. But the erosion that happened to the other streams was managed. This, was mainly, especially at first, only focused on quantity. They didn't care about quality because that was the overriding issue at the time, right? Oh, we got all these volumes, we're having these big storms, they're blowing out streams. What are we going to do? We're going to manage quantity. And if we get some quality benefits along the way, okay. Quality was never the issue during this time period, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. It was just managing volume. So then we said, oh my God, Chesapeake Bay is still killing us. Or we are killing it. We got to do better. And the water quality reports start coming out. Dead zones in the Chesapeake Bay. No oxygen. Plants dying. Fish dying. Oh my God, we got to do it better. This is terrible. We're not making it work the way nature would intend. We are not biomimicking this right.
I don't understand which part of this costs their money. You said it costs a lot of their money.
The developers pay for that?
Yeah, why this, the streams was stabilized and that cost money, why? I don't know.
Okay, because what happened here, so let me draw these in. So these are all, like we saw on our map, these are all streams that go into this way, that's going this way. Okay, so those streams would normally be very stable, the sides would be normal, we'd be, it'd be all good. But what happens when all this water runoff comes off of all this pavement, these are all houses and it's all running into these streams, what happens is the sides collapse. Everything falls down basically, and a lot of the soil ends up downstream. So remember those pictures that we saw? Let me back up to that. Oops. There we go. This is kind of an exaggeration because there's still trees on both sides, but this is what happens. So to restore this and stabilize it, you have to go in and there's a lot of different methods, but one way is to bring in some stone and plant trees in and around it to regenerate the stable sides to it that there were. So what happens is the stream in cross section as you're looking, so here's the water's trickling out. That might be how it looks normal. But then after all the erosion, you've got steep banks on both sides with no trees, nothing left, it's all eroded. So you have to come back in and make it work again and plant trees. And that costs money to get all that stabilizing. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah, don't ever hesitate to stop me because, you know, I speak a language of land development that I've always spoken, so I don't know when I'm, off on a tangent. Or not erasing my arrows. Okay, so we're enough of the trash. So you see how it evolved. At first it was volume, then it was like, we really got to take care of the quality of the water because things are really bad. So then we said, okay, low impact development. Have you heard this term, low impact development? It mainly was focused on stormwater. And it's still kind of, in its definition, it's more just 100% stormwater. So environmental site design is the term that the state of Maryland uses. It's also about stormwater, but it's also about saving native vegetation, reducing grading, you know, which low impact development also was, but, you know, and it's neither here nor there, you know, exactly what these terms mean. I just want you to be exposed to them so when you see them, you're like, oh yeah, that's stormwater micromanagement. So I love this because this was the first subdivision that was done in Prince George's County. It was, I think, the early 90s. That was the first one that was done using this technique. Hugely controversial because some people didn't like having these retention areas and vegetation on their property, but for the most part it was very successful. I think it's interesting because I Googled it and it was on Boston's Municipal Planning Association website. So we're like, all right, Boston, you're taking the stuff from our county, that's cool. But this micromanagement is what they did in this design. So even today, this was, I think last year I pulled this up, I went into the aerials to just see, you know, are these places that were supposed to be preserved still there? Well, they are. Here's some tree preservation. That's a little rain garden that's capturing stormwater to get it to go into the ground. Same here, same here. For the most part, the system's working. They did have to come back in. They didn't calculate the volumes correctly. So they had to come in and do a stormwater pond in the end. Which was kind of disappointing because, you know, it's like, yay, you know, you always want the first one to work, right? So that everybody says, oh, yay, it works. But it's always an iteration. You have to come back and go, well, what didn't work, and we're going to do it better next time. And we certainly have over the years. So here's low impact development elements. You really start with this one right here. Preserve native trees, vegetation soils, maintain natural drainage patterns. This assumes you're going into a brand new site, never been developed before. So it's a little harder to do some LIDs using that one because you're not dealing with a fresh site. Then you've got small scale controls. Mimic the natural hydrology and processes. Biomimicry, right? We're getting that water down into the ground as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Then you customize that site design to protect the entire watershed. You know how many subdivisions I saw that were just so poorly designed, and they were, you know, just trying to get as many lots on there as they could for the client. I get it. But there weren't good decisions regarding which way the water was flowing and, you know, how the sites would be affected. Really important. Probably the most important thing that wasn't very successful on that first subdivision was educating the new owners about what these things were They also were not placed in conservation easements, which is what they do now. They also generally don't put them on individual lots, because you're relying on the property owner's willingness to maintain it, and that's just not happening. So maintenance is very important, and then and education, and then directing runoff to the natural areas. Yeah, that's part of it too, but you have to have natural areas to be able to get the water to them for that to work. So good stuff. All right, so what does that look like on a site?
How does one keep, is it a problem in those retention ponds to start mosquito populations?
What I always say about that is, if you have an efficient, well-balanced ecosystem that includes ducks and other things that eat mosquitoes, any kind of body of water will not be a problem. And mosquitoes actually prefer smaller little, like your dog's dish and puddles and stuff like that. While they will of course go in a big pond like that, they're more inclined to smaller surfaces. But if you bring all the elements of a wet pond to that area, including some wooded cover, and then you balance out the ecosystem.
Okay.
That's the question we get all the time. I don't want this behind my house because it's going to draw mosquitoes. Well, you know what? There's mosquitoes everywhere. It's not going to draw them. Come on, people. Okay. And an ideal pond situation would be that it drains and gets it, infiltrates it back into the ground, because those are easier to maintain than a wet pond is. Anyway, so what does it look like on a site? Well, you've got the conservation of the existing vegetation as much as you can. There's that permeable pavement driveway. Whose was that? Was that you, Carol? Yeah, there's your permeable pavement driveway. Here's an open ditch. Instead of putting the stormwater into a pipe, you let it be in a ditch. Let it hang out. Let it evaporate. Let it infiltrate into the ground. As soon as we put it in a pipe, it can't evaporate. It can't infiltrate into the ground. We're stopping it from doing that. Rain gardens, same thing. Also known as bioretention areas. If you're wondering what the difference between the two terms is, it's really nothing. Some people would say a rain garden is a smaller bioretention area, or a rain garden is, to some people, is less engineered than a bioretention area, and people use the terms interchangeably. By amended soils, they mean, hey, you've got a piece of turf, especially for you, Adam. Somebody's got a piece of turf. You either take out the turf altogether and amend the crap out of it to make it infiltrate more. That's a technique that you could use on your retrofit ideas. And if they want the turf, say, okay, we'll put the turf back. But we want to improve that infiltration, especially if you're trying to get to a zero runoff situation. So lots of ideas, on a simple house design.
So this is one of the areas that I'm very interested in, down in the Outer Banks, where you have lots of renters and they're compacting the soil everywhere. There's already a 30% cutoff of impervious areas, so you have a very small, usually a driveway that can't hold all those cars, so the cars are parking on the grass. Sometimes they park on the septic field, and that happened to us once. But in these compacted areas, so that suggests to make it better, because you're going to have people parking no matter what.
There's a soil stabilization type methods you could do where, if you took it out and you're like, okay, people are going to park here, there's nothing we can do. You can put in, there's a grid system, there's a lot of different designs that do this. Sometimes it's called Grasscrete. There's a product that does that. But what it is it's a solid kind of surface somewhat with openings for infiltration, and then gravel gets placed, or very fine soil gets placed in between the stabilizing structure, mat, whatever it ends up being. Sometimes they're plastic. They use them a lot for, where they're most effective actually is, where was it? It was a library in Anne Arundel County where they had to, the ambulance people said, oh, there's a lot of old people who use the library. We want a path around to the back of the library to be able to get ambulances back there. And of course, my friend who was working on it, it's all green, right? Everything's green in this library. And she's like, you know, curses. So they used this kind of grasscrete thing that would be stable enough for a vehicle from time to time. That's the problem with these products, is that they're meant for from time to time. And if it's only on the weekends, maybe the grass would grow, I don't know. We had a church in DC that, you know, was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this to reduce our impervious surface, because they were almost 100% impervious surface on their lot. And the gravel just went everywhere, and it never grew anything, because they used the facility all week long. So, yeah, some of the products need a little help. So same thing with the commercial application. There's a great company, I don't know what the name of the town is, I guess it's out 66 a little ways, called Wetland Studies and Solutions, WSSI, Wetland Studies and Solutions. And the owner is very green, let's bring your dog to work, so I was like, yeah, sign me up. But they did their whole headquarters as a green building and all that, and they have a huge cistern that they're so proud of, because they collected rainwater, and they use it throughout the building. So that's keeping it on site. They're using it for flushing and stuff that goes into a public sewer system, so is that really purist, keeping it on site? Maybe not. But cisterns are such a great way to manage stormwater, and my prediction is they're just going to get more and more. They're like, you know, rain barrels on steroids, right? They're just going to get more popular as water becomes more of a resource to preserve. Okay, so the big difference between like a conventional subdivision and a low impact subdivision. Conventional subdivision, you've got curb and gutter, you've got sidewalks on both sides of the street. When do children unlearn how to cross the street? Pet peeve. Do we really need sidewalks on both sides of the street? I don't know that we do. Cross the street, kids. And then here's low impact development, no sidewalks, no curb and gutter, open ditches, works great. You know what? People don't like it. Why do you think people don't like it?
It's not ADA compliant, first of all.
It's a subdivision.
But if it's still part of the jurisdiction, like, it depends on where you are, but in like DC, that wouldn't be compliant.
Okay?
It's not manicured.
It's not manicured.
My neighbor
There aren't sharp edges.
It's like that. But
The
it's
low impact.
It's low impact, but it was built in the 50s. And there's always an effort afoot. Why don't the new people move into the neighborhood in the big new torn down, the big built up McMansions, and there's always like this undercurrent. Why don't we have sidewalks and
Yeah,
gutters and
sidewalks
curbs?
and
It's like they're dying
gutters
out
and
there.
curbs.
And those of us who've been living there a long time, it's like, no.
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
people arguing against sidewalks because they feel like they want their development to look rural.
Right.
Therefore, they
Right.
don't want sidewalks.
Or natural.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
people,
I
some
like
people
it.
like it, some people don't. That's for sure. This is a very fuzzy but still effective. This is a little courtyard where these are bioretention areas in the center. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Come out with, you know, all kinds of plants and get to see things, and maybe there's a bench there, and the rain barrels come off the roof, or the rainwater comes off in the gutters on the roof and into these areas. So definitely lowering their discharge considerably. I'm hoping for this house of the future that the continuous gutter captures all the rainwater, takes it down through a filter, takes it down into the storage tank, and then all that water gets pumped up to be used. There's water filter, sinks, dishwasher, or clothes washing, you know, anywhere in the house that you need water, you've got it right there. What a concept. I mean, basically when you live on a well, it's sort of that system already, because you have Adam, do you have a big tank in your basement that
Yeah, but we
holds the water?
yeah, we did a project on a mountainside where we piped all their gutters into a septic tank, but I mean it was a clean one, and put a float on it so they could water their whole landscape from all the water, rainwater
Coming off the house.
coming off the house.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a resource, we gotta start treating it like that, yeah. So, where am I at here? I wanna talk about this project real quick, cause this is a good example of, okay, so the new stormwater concept, I wasn't keeping up with my text here, micro management. So it's not a regional pond, it's not a great big thing, it's not even a stormwater pond on your property in one location. It's managing it in small little pieces all over the site. It respects the bioregion when native plants are used, conserves energy, and embraces that holistic thinking. You know, we're getting everybody involved. All this stuff is gonna go right into the ground. Okay, so we talked about that. So environmental site design, to do it well, you really have to understand the ecological context of the site. If you know, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but this is a whole big wetland restoration, regeneration project that I worked on in Fairfax. If we didn't understand what plants love it there, that grow in there, you know, any kind of landscape designer will say if you go into a site, you know, in Maryland I'd always look for azaleas because that would, and how are they doing, because that would tell me you have acid soils. You look for indicator plants, you know, what plants are showing up here? What plants should we be going with? There were huge sycamores just downstream from this site. So we chose sycamores as a kind of a iconic tree for this restoration. We went and looked at what was doing well in similar stream systems around, and you're going to do that in your watershed journal too. Go find a, what's it called? Reference. You find a reference stream that, you know, here you've got a stream that's really degraded. Go find a reference stream that shows you what that stream should look like, and that's what we did for a project like this. So you really have to understand all of what's going on there. Okay, so multidisciplinary approach, preserve what you can, and preserve and restore these aquatic areas. You know, so all of these things go into environmental site design. You could call it sustainable site design if you wanted to. So one of the ways that we implemented, you know, this was an environmental site design in the late 90s. So we weren't thinking about sustainable design, we weren't thinking about ecological design, but I was working with the owner of the Wetland Studies and Solutions, and we rolled up our sleeves and said, this is all developer paid for, because they were coming in to build on the adjacent site, and this whole stream system was completely blown out by Fair Oaks Mall. Fair Oaks Mall was built, I want to say late 70s, early 80s. Almost no stormwater management. I mean, it was that like 20 acres of impervious surface, and it dumps out to that outfall.